Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I'm Zachary Ring from Thea Enterprises. For those of you who don't know me, I'm sure everybody on the call at this point knows Graham Davis. We're going to be presenting today. I'm going to be doing most of this as I put together the presentation, but Graham's going to jump in because he's had a lot of experience dealing with upgrades over the year, dealing with illumination when it was a current system. He has some tips and tricks to share. He's going to talk about the extraction utility a little bit later. But Graham, before we get started, hate to put you on the spot, but do you want to say anything about the upgrade opportunity and why you think it's valuable?
It's a very large opportunity for everybody and anybody, especially in today's climate when we may lose some business because of the COVID and people's want to be in the city anymore. So if you've got customers that you've serviced with illumination years back, it'll be a good idea to reach out to them with a postcard or something. We're actually assembling a postcard for you to use that will be editable, which you could send to your customers just to let them know that their system is 15, 16 years old and it may need some upgrades.
Yeah, and today I'm excited about this presentation. We've done a lot of webinars here at Thea recently, and I've been involved with a lot of them, but I'm really excited about this one. We've put a lot of thought into this. We have a lot of heads that came together to put this content together. So we have all of our experience. I've had experience at Lutron for over 5 years working on these upgrades. Graham and Scott have lots of experience. We've interviewed some of our top dealers in the territory who are kind enough to share some of their tips and tricks and what they've seen, potential pitfalls. And we did take some of the content that Lutron has, but if you've seen upgrade presentations at the Resi Ops Tour, maybe even ones from me over the past several years, this one is brand new. We kind of blew that one out of the water and we built this content from the ground up. So I'm going to dive right into the presentation. I thank everybody for coming. I know 2 hours on a webinar is a lot to ask of everybody, but we have a lot of content to get through. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. A couple things to note: questions. Please ask questions throughout the presentation. I'm going to try to keep an eye on that, but it might be hard. So maybe I'll take a break halfway through, or at the end, I'll definitely make sure that I cover everybody's questions. There is going to be a recording of this available. I think it's positive. We have a lot of people who are starting to get back to work now, so we have a lot of techs out in the field. I am going to send everybody a copy of this recording so that you can share with everybody. And last but not least, I put some important documents in the handouts section. So lots of important app notes, a couple of promos, important documents like that. And just to preface this whole presentation, it's a lot to cover in 2 hours. It's very complex, especially if you've never seen illumination before, if you've never done an upgrade before. So a lot of this is going to making sure that you know what resources to use, where to find the information, and just to really be comfortable with this at a high level. So just to kind of see who we have on the call, I looked at the registration list. I know a lot of you, but I just want to ask a couple questions here. So for instance, have you ever installed or programmed a new illumination system? So who are my guys who have been out there doing this for a long time when HomeWorks illumination was a current system? So just go ahead and answer this poll really quick. I want to see who we have on the call. This is also my secret way of making sure you guys are paying attention because I can see who's answering these questions. All right. Let's take a look at this. So we have a lot of experienced people on this call. 56% said yes, they have done a new HomeWorks illumination system when it was a current system. That's fantastic. It's going to make you feel more comfortable with offering these upgrades. You're really going to understand the architecture of the system. And better yet, maybe you were the one who originally put in the HomeWorks illumination system, so you can think back and understand your own logic. Now, one thing that I find this interesting is you may go back to a job that you did 10 years ago and be like, I know I did this, but this is interesting. Why did I do it this way? Why did I program it like that? We're all constantly learning. That's why you're on this webinar today. So you might do things differently or better than that today than you did 10 years ago. And we have one other poll here that I want to ask. So how many of you have actually performed an upgrade before? I know a lot of you are here to learn about the upgrade process because you haven't done it, but based on the registration list, I have a good feeling that a bunch of you have been through this process before. Maybe you're just jumping on because you want to learn some tips and tricks, or it's been a while since you've done an upgrade. Maybe you are just diligent about getting to all the online learning possible, and that's why your business is so successful. I love learning. I'm always trying to learn more, and this is great. I love what I'm seeing coming in here. We have about 60%, so over half of you have already done an upgrade before. Hopefully it was smooth sailing. I know that there are absolutely roadblocks that you can hit, and one thing that we're going to talk about here today is I'd say that no two upgrades are the same. Sometimes they're smooth sailing. You don't have to replace any devices. You're able to extract the project file. It's not corrupt. Use the conversion tool. It's nice and easy. Other ones, you get into situations where it's all RF and D48, and now you're replacing all the devices and you can't get the program file, or you're able to extract it and it's corrupt, and the customer wants all their programming to be the same as it was before. So hopefully most of your upgrades probably are falling somewhere in between that, and we're going to talk about as many possible scenarios today as possible. And last but not least, this one's kind of a fun one. Do you like making money? Yes or no? All right, and I can see these answers as they come in. So, well, whoever said no, I'll give you my Venmo information. You don't have to share. So, obviously, most of you guys like making money. We're going to talk about why this is an important way to supplement your business. And as Graham said, especially during this time, I think it's a fantastic way to make sure that we have jobs in the pipeline, and talk about not only how we're going to get these systems up and running, but how you may be able to replace additional hardware to make some more money, but really to give the customer the best end user experience possible. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up my PowerPoint. Please let me know if you can't see my screen or you can't hear me at any point during this presentation. So taking a look at the agenda, we're going to talk about the upgrade opportunity. And while Lutron likes to think that we might just be able to go out and say, hey, we can get Alexa to work with your HomeWorks system. You just have to spend $50,000 to upgrade, or look at this feature, or look at that feature. It's not often that somebody will take a fully functional HomeWorks illumination system and upgrade all the processors and upgrade other components just to get one of those niceties. Now, they are absolutely benefits that come along with the upgrade. It might make them feel better about the upgrade, but there's really two different scenarios that will get you into an upgrade situation. And what's really important more than anything else on this presentation is making sure that when you go into this and while you're going through the upgrade process, that you're documenting things correctly, you're getting the right date codes, you're getting the right link information, you're pulling the right reports. A lot of this is about gathering the right information. And another big piece of this is how you present these solutions to the customer. A lot of this comes back to you and your ability to sell and your ability to manage relationships. And I think that's why a lot of you are all successful today, but you need to put some thought into how you're going to have these conversations, how you're going to present the different options to the customer, and how you're just going to make them feel okay during some uncomfortable conversations. We are going to do a review of HomeWorks Illumination Basics. So we're going to talk about the system architecture, talk about the different links, talk about what needs licenses, what needs translators. This is good because even if you've gone through this training or a similar training 3 years ago, things change. Lutron makes updates to licenses. They make updates to the converter tool. So we'll just make sure everybody's on the same page. We are going to do a quick software overview. there was about half the people on this call who haven't done an illumination system from scratch. So good news is if you're doing an upgrade, you don't need to know all the ins and outs of the HomeWorks illumination software, but you definitely want to know your way around the software, know how to pull files, maybe know how to upload a file, how to run diagnostics, how to pull different reports, and how to extract a program. And then last but not least, how does this actually move over to HomeWorks QS? How to use the conversion tool, what gets converted, what doesn't get converted, making sure you're billing for the right amount of programming, how to get the license keys, how to put them into the software, and other things to look out for. And this picture doesn't really have a lot to do with upgrades. I just love dogs, and I love the dog peeking around the corner here. But this is from the luxury Lutron website, I believe, and that's why there's lighting and shade. So it's relevant, but at the end of the day, I just like dogs. And they will probably make a guest appearance at some point during this 2-hour presentation. I'll be shocked if you don't hear barking at some point or a train going by. One of the two, if not both. And if you're really listening closely, you can probably hear my dart frogs chirping in the background as well. So right here we have a fully loaded HomeWorks illumination processor. And what I mean by that is we have 8 links. It looks like we have an H48 bus on the bottom. There's RS-232 serial connections. There's Ethernet connections. There's a lot going on here. So if you're not familiar with HomeWorks illumination, the processors were much different than the QS processor. I'd say the QS processor is a much more streamlined and configurable version, and is actually, it costs less too. But you're not getting as much. This is a bit of a Swiss Army knife here. You get everything but the kitchen sink. So what leads us to an upgrade? Most likely some sort of processor or component failure. Customer is in a situation where they cannot control their lights other than using local dimmers or breakers. They get into a situation where their keypads are not responsive. This is everybody's worst fear about going with a panelized system where you're using low voltage keypads. This is a very smart system. It's relying on the brain of the system, and if something happens to that component, they're going to be out of luck. And I think the other good important thing to note here is that systems where this is happening, they are old systems. This isn't a system that was put in 2 years ago. It's a piece of technology. You look at other pieces of technology like computers and phones, they're not lasting more than 10, 15 years either. There is a processor loaner program. The other thing too, Lutron is at a point where they don't want you calling up and just buying new processors and trying to do band-aid fixes on these systems. So there is a processor loaner program where the customer can purchase a new processor that's designed to be used for, let's say, 90 days to buy you time to plan the upgrade, schedule the upgrade, order the parts and pieces, get your techs scheduled, get everything lined up to perform the upgrade, and give them control over their system in the meantime. But it's not meant to be a long-term solution. Their entire system is a decade old at this point. So what you don't want to do is, by the time you buy the processor, which is about, it's close to $6,000 now, and the labor to go in and do all this, you could be looking at $10,000. And then something else could just fail 2 months later, and then something else could fail a couple months after that. And you really don't want to go down that rabbit hole. So while the loaner program is in place and you technically could get a new processor for the system, not designed to be a long-term fix. Really, you're looking at this system as a whole living, breathing thing, right? The processors, they're the brain of the system. So replacing that, I think if we're trying to be glass half full here, things like the RPM panels, there's significant costs in the panels of the system, the things actually switching the lights on and off and dimming the lights. In most scenarios, you'll be able to keep those RPM panels in place. You may be able to keep the keypads, keep shades. So that's important. And getting the new processor on the job, you can expect another decade plus without having to worry about anything, because the brain of the system has been refreshed now. It's up to date and it has a new warranty. And really, I think customers may be thinking, well, my light switches aren't failing. The light switch isn't something I ever have to replace. Well, this is more like a computer. This is more like a computer system, a very intelligent computer system. And I want them to think of it more like a laptop or a phone, or even another system in their house, like the HVAC system. For an HVAC system to be running constantly, nonstop, 24/7 hours a day, for 10 years, you'd expect for there to be components that need to be replaced. So the other way that we could get into an upgrade scenario is a programming update request. So maybe customers have been living with this system for a long time, something changes with their lifestyle, they've just never been happy with it. Maybe they just recently bought a house that has the HomeWorks illumination system in it, but now they're coming to you asking you to change programming on the system. You really, really, really need to be cautious if you're getting involved with a situation like this. Um, you know, some of these systems, if they're working fine and they're a decade old, it's like, I don't want to touch them with a 10-foot pole, right? You breathe on them the wrong way and you could have a problem with the processor. So, you know, I'd be very nervous about doing uploads and changes to the system without the customer understanding that if I move forward with this and we want to try this, I want you to sign off on the fact that if something goes wrong, we are willing and able to move forward with a full-blown upgrade, meaning replacing all the processors. This component here would need to be upgraded. We need a license for that, right? This is not just a quick programming change where I come in and this takes an hour or two. This would be a major ordeal. So I think it's good to plan this preemptively. I think to be proactive about this conversation, to be upfront about what could happen, and say, really the right and safe way to do this would be to upgrade the processors, to upgrade these other key components. We can make all the changes that you want. We can refresh this system. We can custom cater the programming to you and your family, get you all new stuff in here, and we can plan it around your schedule. So when's the next time you're going to be on vacation? You're going to the summer house, you're going here, you're going there. We can plan it around your schedule. Where if I just go in and I try to touch this thing and things go south, now we're almost in, an emergency service call type situation. It's going to be a major inconvenience. We're not going to have control over the lights. And now we're rushing guys out there on the job, having them work crazy hours to get this thing up and running. So it's going to end up costing more and it's going to be a major inconvenience. So I think it's really important. This is when it's still not a great conversation or a fun conversation to have, but it's better than having the conversation when none of their lights in their 12,000 square foot home work. So what's next? We want to gather the right information. And this is super critical. And maybe you're not the one who's going to be out on the job site gathering this information. If you're not going to be the one going out, I think it's very important that you put together documentation for your tech saying, here's exactly what I need you to do when you're out here. Here's all the notes I need you to take. Here's the pictures I need you to take. Here's the connections I need you to label. This is a crucial part of the process, especially if you didn't do the job originally. Even if you did the job originally, we're talking about systems that are a decade old. Some of us, myself included, I can't remember some of the stuff I did last week. I'm not going to remember exactly what I did 10 years ago. That's crazy. So if you did the system originally, hopefully you still have a copy of the database somewhere. It's just a best practice, being able to back up these databases somewhere. That's always good. If you don't have a copy, I think it's important to set expectations correctly with the customer. I'd say, talking with several other people and with my own experience, I think there's at least 30% of the time where you're not going to be able to extract the database successfully. So maybe you'll be able to get the database, but are you able to open it? So don't just think, all right, I got the database, it's smooth sailing, I got everything I need, I can use the converter tool, I'm gonna get the reports, I'm gonna get the programming, this is nice and easy. Make sure that you can open the database successfully. Make sure you can poke around that everything looks good, that it's not crashing, that you're not getting errors. I'd even run it through the converter tool if you can, just to make sure that the whole process is gonna go smoothly, because sometimes you could have a fully functional system and the backup copy of the database that's stored there is corrupt. And even if you send it into Lutron, if it's not over a certain file size, they're not going to be able to do anything with it either. I would use the extraction utility and a USB to RS-232 cable whenever possible. Myself, several of the people I've talked to, Graham and Scott, we've just all had better success when doing it this way. And I wanted to add the extraction utility as a handout because it's actually not posted on lutron.com right now, but I'm going to email everybody the installer file for that extraction utility because I think it's a super important thing to have in your tool bag when you go out to these job sites. And then also just go on Amazon, get a USB to serial RS-232 cable, make sure you have that ready to go. If you can't connect that way, the next best thing would be doing IP and you go through the TCP IP wizard, but I would try to do a direct connection to the main processor if possible versus trying to deal with potential challenges on the network. And if you're in a situation where they're not able to control their lights and there's a major issue, I don't think it's a bad idea to consider taking that processor offsite to a controlled environment, take it back to your office. I'm not superstitious, but sometimes I think about like putting things out there in the universe and all that nonsense. Um, I hate being at a job site and having the homeowner staring over your shoulder on a Friday afternoon at 4 o'clock. Things just don't tend to go smoothly. I'd much rather be sitting in the comfort of my office or my house trying to make this connection and trying to pull out the information. If you do that, make sure that you label all those links before you remove the processor. These processors have a lot of different links on them. A lot of them look the same. So what you don't want to do is in a hurry, just disconnect everything from the processor and then you go back to the job site. And it's not like a QS processor where you just have 2 links. It's like, well, let's try this. Nope, doesn't work. Let's try that. Now you have 8 different links that you're trying to line back up. So just make sure you label everything, document everything. Fortunately, we all live in an era now where we have smartphones with good cameras on them, everything else. I used to work on airplanes and it was so important to take pictures of everything, to label every part and bolt that came off that plane. It just makes everything much easier when you're putting it back together. And then we have the detailed processor link report. So if you have the database, there's lots of good reports in HomeWorks Illumination. I think when we went to HomeWorks QS, we actually lost some of the good reports that we had in Illumination. But the detailed processor link assignment report gives you a really good snapshot of everything on the system. So it lists out the panel, the processor in the panel, and then it goes link by link, 1 through 8, and it shows you exactly what's connected. It shows if it has an internal MI, an external MI, what RPMs there are there, how many keypads are on a link. It shows all of that. Now, one thing that it might not show is what keypads are actually active and working. We've all done it. We've added in keypads as virtual or phantom keypads that might not actually be on the system. So if you're in a situation where you talk to the customer and you decide to order new QSC Touch keypads to replace the Illumination keypads, you don't need to order keypads to replace phantom keypads because they're not there. So if it's possible, if you have a functional system and the database, run diagnostics on the Illumination system and just see what keypads and dimmers are actually online versus just relying on the report. And last but not least, I'd really want you to kind of step through this whole process before discussing any kind of final numbers with the customer. Test the database conversion tool, make sure that you got the file, you can open the file, you can run it through the converter tool, you can open it in QS and see what's there. See how much work this is going to be. Make sure everything's labeled correctly. Make sure that it makes enough sense for you to move forward with it. If they had a bunch of conditional programming, see if they had a bunch of sequences, because now the converter tool is awesome. It does a lot of the work for you, but if you had any kind of special programming, that needs to be accounted for. You need to bill for the amount of time that it's going to take to recreate that special programming. Maybe they're not even using it though. So I think it's important to, at some point, talk to the customer about how they're using their system, and if they're even using those hidden press and hold functions, or if they're using all the conditionals in the system, if they're using all the sequences in the system. They might not have even known that those things were there, so then you don't have to take the time recreating those functions. And what about if you don't have the database? Now what? This is getting close to worst case scenario, obviously. You don't get all those reports, you don't get the converter tool. So very obvious apparent challenges. I think one of the biggest challenges is if you are trying to recreate all the programming exactly how it was on Illumination, on QS, and you don't have any kind of reference as to what the programming was other than the customer basically telling you how it was. So if at all possible, I would try to steer them away from that and have a conversation about using this opportunity to update and customize the system to how they live today in 2020. Before you start doing any of this, if you walk in and you can't get the database, don't just start disconnecting links and buses to see what turns on and what turns off and how things are wired. Before you touch anything, make sure you document everything, label everything, photograph everything in its current state before you start disconnecting any links or trying to trace anything. If you don't do this, things aren't going to make sense later in the upgrade process. And while there's documents out there, they might not be specific to the system. Things were done, I mean, I've walked through some crazy jobs that were done 10, 12 years ago that don't make sense, right? A lot of times you want to think, all right, how would I have done this? If you're walking in and you're inheriting somebody else's job, think about, all right, how would I have done this? But sometimes you walk in a job and you're like, what the hell was this guy thinking? Why is it done like this? Where are all these disconnected links? Why are these wires just dangling here? Where do they go? What's this bundle of wire doing here? Why do they have all these boards and they're only utilizing one bus on each, right? So some of it doesn't make sense, but you're never going to make sense of it unless you document it. A lot of times when I worked on planes, we worked on things that had manuals, and it was always, okay, boom, 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 this gets connected here, this gets connected here, this wire should be this color, this wire should be that color. I did some, a couple jobs where we actually worked on some experimental stuff. And then it's like who knows, especially if you don't have the guy who built the airplane there to ask him questions. So this just reminds me a lot of that. It's very important to document everything. And like I said before, avoid trying to replicate the existing program if possible. And if you're in a situation where you have the ability to replace the keypads, or you break down the costs and it really just makes sense to update the keypads at this point, it makes it much easier, because at that, you can just treat it as a new job at that point. So ask the customer leading questions about how they use the system. Are they even the original owners of the system? Maybe the system was programmed for another family. How happy are they with the programming? Are their guests or family members ever confused by how the system functions? I find this all the time. I walk into systems, I'm like, yeah, this is confusing. I know this stuff inside and out, and this confuses me, let alone somebody who's not familiar with how the system works behind the scenes. Is there even engraving on the keypads? Sometimes you walk into a 20,000 square foot home and it's just all blank button kits. Drives me crazy. So this is a big opportunity for you to add additional value. After asking all these questions, after talking to the customer, show them how you can optimize their system with the new software, with the new hardware, with all your knowledge and your industry expertise. Show them how you can take their system to the next level. And the other thing that's nice is now they're not just paying a bunch of money just to get their system working and have exactly what they had before. Now they're spending a bunch of money to get a refreshed, optimized system that they're just going to be happier with at the end of the day. And I think we can all agree, maybe just at your own company, you personally in the industry, I think that programming standards have improved. They have gotten better. I look at how some systems were programmed 10, 15 years ago, and they just don't make sense. I look back at some programming that I did 5 years ago, and it's not how I'd program a system today. So even if this was one of your jobs that your company did 10 years ago, I would be shocked if you couldn't go back in and find ways to make the system better for the customer, knowing everything that you know today. And obviously, when you go down this path, it's going to take extra time, it's going to take extra labor. So make sure that you're accounting for that. You don't want to be giving this away. You want to make these upgrades profitable for you and your company. So then let's talk about presenting the options to the customer. Obviously, you want to be transparent about the process, the costs, associated risks with taking different paths. So to do that, I think it's always good to present different options. So, maybe the good option is, all right, bare minimum to get your system up and running, we can get you a new processor in here. But here's what could happen if we just go down this route, and it's still going to cost you $10,000. And 6 months from now, we could be back here in the same situation. Better, all right, let's replace all the processors, get you up to HomeWorks QS. We can use link licenses, or you might want to present it as there's certain components that can be purchased to allow your old keypads and shades to work on the new system. Now, at that point, you still do have a lot of old shade drives here that are 10 plus years old, and you have a lot of old keypads here. So what I don't want to happen is to do random service calls 6 months from now because you have a keypad that doesn't work, and now we need to go replace that keypad, or now you have a shade drive that doesn't work, and it may be impossible to get a direct replacement. So now we're looking at replacing a whole group of shades with QS shades. So while we have the hood open on this, the best way to do this would be to go through and, yeah, you know what, I've been out here a couple times in the past year. We've had shades that are losing limits, some drives that have failed, some that are running at different speeds. We can take we can take everything down, reuse the shades that are there, put in new drives. Good news is you have the infrastructure there for the keypads. We can get you all fresh, shiny new keypads, maybe modernize the aesthetic slightly, at least get nice clean button kits on there, optimize the programming, and then you don't have to worry about anything for at least the next 10 years, right? Not anything you need to think about. Once and done, let's take care of this. Let's do some preventative maintenance. Let's not worry about chasing random problems. Let's have all renewed warranties and get you updated and refreshed aesthetics. So present all the options, but make sure that I would give them the option of, all right, well, we do have the wiring in place. We have the infrastructure in place to replace these components while we're in here, while we're already doing the labor, while we're already doing the programming. Let's just get it all done so you don't have to worry about it anymore. So just like I said before, while you can use the illumination keypads, provide the customer with options. And when you're breaking down these different options, here's where it could be beneficial to be transparent about the costs. Is, look at how much it's going to cost just to reuse those old keypads versus getting new keypads. So if you add up the cost of the license, the translator, possibly additional processor links that are required, which could bump you out to another QS processor, maybe that's another $800 one link processor, the power supplies that you need to buy for those, right? Now it's like, maybe it does make sense to spend a couple thousand more just to refresh all the keypads on the link in the main area of the house. And if this is a big project and you have a guest house or the main area and then the other area of the home, this isn't all or nothing. Maybe you update some of the links to QS links and you update the aesthetics, or you go through and You look at the old H48 dirty maestros in all the bathrooms that, people are touching with dirty hands all the time. Maybe you go ahead and replace those devices. I think what's important to know, there's so many times where people want to, on a retrofit job, update to something like Palladium, and they just can't because they have 120 in the wall. They have traditional switch wiring where the load's wired back, and you just can't do Palladium. Here, they already have the infrastructure in place for these keypads that offer modern and updated aesthetics. I think as you're going through this process, even if you're taking that better approach where you're not replacing everything, I always think it's nice to provide the customer with a couple new things and show them that their system's better now. So adding something like Picos on pedestals and scattering them through key areas of the home. Maybe they didn't have a lot of tabletop keypads, maybe they're broken, maybe they're lost, maybe they're always having to walk over to the wall keypad. People love Picos. They're very inexpensive. They're not going to move the needle a lot, but now they feel like they have some new toys to play with on their new system. I think the in-wall dimmers, if they have Maestro H48 in-wall dimmers, go ahead and consider swapping in some Pro dimmers. Especially a lot of these people swapped out LED lighting. You start having the conversation, oh yeah, you know what? I do have a lot of these different zones that flicker and flash, or they don't shut off all the way. I've been struggling with it. Great. Well, you already have the brain, the heart, all the appendages in place for us to just go in and swap in new updated dimmers from 2020 that will be much better with controlling the LED lighting that you put in. Like I said before, if you're looking at dingy, dirty keypads and dimmers, you might not be able to get color change kits. So now's a good time to go in and update those dimmers. And with Clear Connect RF and having all the retrofit options, it's very easy to just pull out one and put in another. Not a lot of work involved there. Like I said before, if they've been struggling with their QED shades, now would be the time to go in and replace the drives and move everything to QS. If you're going to do this, I'd be very upfront about having disclaimers about what could happen to fabric panels when you're pulling these shades down and putting them back up. You might be in a situation where there's already damage to the fabric panels by the time you get to them. So you don't want to be blamed for causing additional damage or being blamed for the damage that was already there that you didn't cause in the first place. So be upfront about that. And if one panel needs to be replaced, you're going to have to replace the panels on the facade. If you can't just get away with replacing one panel at that point, it would look crazy. Even if you could match up the fabric, one's been in place for 10 years. So I would make sure that you're upfront with that as well. And once you start going down this path, customers may be like, you know what, these fabrics are kind of old and dingy, and we've updated some of the other decor in the house. The labor is already being done to drop these shades down. Maybe I do want to update the fabrics in these couple key rooms. This one is a bit of a pipe dream. I think that you guys should keep reaching for it. I know several people who have tried to do this, but talking about Ketra, one thing that's going to be tough is these customers aren't, it's not like a customer building a new house who's hearing about this or hearing about that or going into showrooms. They don't know what Ketra is. They've been living under a lighting control rock for the past 10 years. But what's cool about Ketra is it does offer some form factors for retrofit, like D4Rs and the PAR style lamps and the A style lamps. But what's challenging is in some of these old homes, if they have a bunch of candelabras on a chandelier, if they have MR16s, all these things were popular, the Ketra offering is still somewhat limited. So you might not be able to go in and do a space, but I mean, that would be an awesome opportunity and something that would need the QS infrastructure to get Ketra. KNet compatible devices are still available. And one thing I want to talk about here is that we are updating to QS at this point. QSX does not have everything in place to support all the illumination components. And even looking at things long term, I don't know if it ever will. I'd be willing to bet that the RPM link is going to be supported at some point. So that might be another reason to push people towards updating their keypads to QS or updating their shade drives to QS. Because at that point, if the QSX processor ends up supporting RPMs, then it's just a processor swap, and now they are 100% up to date. And QS is still a current platform. It's not obsolete. It's still being supported. It's still being sold as new systems. So and it's leaps and bounds better than what they had before. And all the hardware, all the QS style hardware in the wall, that's all current, and it's going to be current for years to come. So back to Ketra, if you are going to retrofit this in, maybe they had circuits controlled by RPMs before, use the bypass jumpers so that it's not going through the modules. You don't want to be line voltage dimming your Ketra bulbs. And then you could use RFC touch keypads to replace any local dimmers that might have been in place controlling those circuits, right? You don't not a hybrid, you just use the hot and neutral that's there, and just make it hot going up to the lights. Now, what I'm going to talk about here, these are just some of the niceties that they get with the upgrade. So yes, Mr. Customer, along with this, we are bringing your system up to 2020. There's a lot of benefits that you're going to get along with this. Here's some new integrations we can do. I see you're already using Sonos or Alexa or Google voice control or Siri voice control in your house. Now we can tie that all in on your system. Here's all the things that you get. You get free remote access again. You get geofencing, low battery alerts, a lot of other features that weren't on the Home Control Plus app. Just PSA here, Lutron has officially discontinued support of Lutron Home Control Plus. So while I don't think anybody's just gonna jump and do this upgrade just so that their app does all these things, I think it's possible that you could get a call where a customer's app doesn't work anymore at all. They loved their app. Now their iOS version doesn't work with the Home Control Plus app. Lutron isn't making any more updates to the Home Control Plus app. So if they want the app control back, they would have to move to the Connect platform, which requires QS processors. And why do you guys care about this? Well, it's that last poll question. Do you like making money? Do you want to stay in business? Do you want to supplement your new construction business? This is an important part. Well, I think it makes sense when I think about it, but there are many more illumination systems out there than QS systems. And they all have this Achilles heel. These processors are reaching the end of their lives, and we at Thea recently have seen lots and lots and lots of upgrade opportunities. On a daily basis, we have seen an uptick in upgrade opportunities. So while yes, this can just help supplement your business, doing the good or the better option, making some additional revenue, I think once you get people used to the idea of this and you talk about, while we have the hood open and doing it the right way and replacing everything, it could lead to a significant amount of additional hardware sales, or potentially even expanding to some parts of the home that they never had on there before. And a lot of these upgrades, like I said on slide 1, are going to be inevitable. If they're in a situation where they can't control their lights with their keypad, they are going to need to do some sort of upgrade. And if you're not able to provide that solution, somebody's going to need to, because they're not just going to continue to live with controlling their lights using circuit breakers. All right. Let's talk about the HomeWorks illumination system. I think this thing looks like a bit of an octopus. If you've never seen it before, this is an 8 series processor, and basically there's a different link for every device type. So right now on our current HomeWorks platform, you basically have a QS link and you have an RF link. Wired low voltage devices, clear connect RF devices that use 120. And that's it, because now even the panel type devices with the DIN modules have moved over to the QS link. So that's all been consolidated, which makes your system design easier. It lowers cost. But back then, it's like everything gets its own link. It's like you get a link, you get a link. Keypads, you get a link. Dimmers, you get a link. It was very, very divided. Even the processors, they had their own inner processor link. They didn't talk the same way that the QS processors talked. Now, fortunately, similar wiring topology, similar communication protocols, but while some of these devices might be QS compatible with a license, some of them will need to be replaced. For instance, RF, while it was still wireless RF and the devices looked very similar, still like Clear Connect, the packets of information that are being sent back and forth are very different. So that's not going to work. Those devices are just going to need to be replaced. Some devices may be HomeWorks QS compatible without any kind of license or translator or anything like that. Lutron has been reusing those old RPM modules for years and years and years. So as long as you're dealing with illumination MIs and RPMs and the date code checks out, you'll be able to just use those on QS. And if you're looking at what really makes up a big chunk of the cost of the system, it's the dimming panels, right? Be tens of thousands of dollars wrapped up in dimming panels, and it's nice that those don't have to be replaced. But when you're walking into these jobs, it's something to look for. It's something your techs need to look for and document, because who knows, this could have been an interactive system that got updated to illumination at some point. And now you got really old panels in there that aren't going to be compatible, and it could cause communication issues and fade rate issues if you tried to move them over to QS. So check out the MI and RPM date codes. All this information, I don't think you need to be taking notes or stressing out about remembering date codes right now. There are 2 app notes. They're attached in the handout section. They go through all this information. So technically speaking, you guys could just log off the call now and just look at the documents. I'm just kidding. Don't do that. I don't want to see attendees dropping off. There's a lot of valuable tips and tricks I'm going to talk about, but I'm not going to go crazy with having you guys trying to remember everything. But in a nutshell, panel link, yes. Keypads, yes. H48, yes. D48 Vario dimmers, no. Sorry, you're out of luck. Those need to be replaced with RF or H48. I'd steer you towards RF. Graphic eyes, yes, but maybe you want to replace them if there's only a couple, because you could only have 8 on a link anyways. QED shades, yes. RF devices, no. So in a nutshell, that's what it looks like. I am going to go link by link here pretty quickly just to talk about some details on each link. Looking at the different processors that you might encounter, here's what the different link connections are going to look like. This guy is the Swiss Army knife, the 8 series. It's like the mothership. It's got everything. You got the MI link, different configurable links. You might have built-in H48 boards. You might have built-in MIs like this one here. Then we have 4 series processors, and then you had just this little RF processor with the little like LCD screen thing on the front. That was typically used as like an add-on processor or used on smaller jobs. But looking at the different links, power panel link, the RPM link, however you want to look at it, here's where we're at. So L01 date code and before should be replaced. So that's really the cutoff for both MIs and RPMs. And with RPMs, while if you see red labels, that's normally a good sign, there's still a brief period of time where the labels went red, but we were pre-2003. So the only way to really be sure is to double check the date codes on there, double check the date codes on the MI. If your processor had an internal MI, if that MI was built into the proc, that needs to be replaced regardless. Any subsequent panels that had MIs in them, external ones though, you might be able to keep those. 4E modules can be used, but you're not going to find a 4E in the HomeWorks QS software, so you have to use a 4A, just drop a 4A in the panel, and then make sure that you're only attaching reverse phase loads to that module, because all the rules aren't going to be in place to prevent you from doing something stupid. And I just went over that. All right, interprocessor link. Now, all the HomeWorks processors communicate over the network. You can daisy chain up to 5 processors, and they should all be on the same local area network. And the nice thing about HomeWorks QS is you could connect to any processor without the other ones being online, and you'd be able to extract the database. If you had something where you had a pool house and you just had an interprocessor link running over to the pool house, there are these little widgets that you can buy that you could use the existing wiring and then get an Ethernet connection on each side so that you could put the QS processor out in the pool house. So on that it was like on the first couple of slides, you saw that nice shot of the illumination processor and you saw the RS-232 links on there. As you know, HomeWorks QS does not have an RS-232 link. So you have to use something like this little Digi1 guy here if you need to do integration with RS-232. Not going to do any transfers using RS-32. You're not going to do any extractions from a QS processor with RS-232. But if you need to do some sort of third-party integration that was existing with the illumination processor and they use that serial port, just reference this document. This is, probably one of the most fun documents I updated when I still worked at Lutron. We maintained and wrote all the app notes. That's one of the things I used to do when I worked at Lutron. But this document points to some specific converters that I tested and my team tested, and we show you not only the settings you need to make on the Lutron side, but the settings that you need to make on the Digi1 side as well, which is useful. All the screenshots are there, all the settings are there that you need. So then we have links 4 through 6. These are configurable links. So you could set these up very much like how the QS links are configurable now, and you can select power panel, QS, RF. Links 4 through 6 is when Lutron started to get into that mentality. So you could have keypads, you could have H48, you could have graphic eye. H48 is still a current link type in QS, so you do not need a link license for this. If you're more than 50 feet away, if this interface is more than 50 feet away from the processor, you should have the link translator. I don't think it's a bad idea if you're even near 50 feet to have the link translator. I'd say if you have a link translator on hand for every legacy link, just in case, $40 isn't going to break the bank. It's literally the cheapest part of this upgrade. There's no integral H48 boards in HomeWorks QS, so if you had a built-in board on illumination, you need to buy an external board for QS, and those reside in the LV17 panel, like the one shown over here. So you need to have an LV17 panel and the H48 board. So just another reason why you might consider replacing those with RF devices. There's a good chance you're going to have other Clear Connect, what's called Type A RF devices on the job now. Might be a good idea just to replace those H48 dimmers with RF dimmers and have them on the RF link. Q96. You're going to already have an external Q96 if you had QED shades there, so you don't have to worry about that. But there is a link license required. You can have up to 4 Q96s on the link, but you can't max out each one. There's a total of 256 addresses available, and that can be split up amongst those Q96s however you see fit. That's infrastructure is already going to be in place, though, on the illumination system. Once again, you don't need one, but if you're over 50 feet away, it's a good idea to have a link translator. And it can share a link with H48. So you could potentially have H48 dimmers and Q96 on the same actual link connection. While you don't need a license for H48, you will need a license to support the QED shades on that link. D48, not supported. You got to replace it. The H48 and D48 topology are the same. You would just need an H48 board and you need H48 dimmers, but the wiring is all the same there. Those buses are going to be the same. I would strongly encourage you to do RF versus H48. I don't think it's a good idea to be replacing equipment with other legacy equipment. You might as well bring them up to 2020, throw some pro dimmers in there, scatter some repeaters around. Because if you look at the cost breakdown, you're going to need an LV17, you're going to need an H48 interface, you're going to need to buy a bunch of 848 dimmers. Here's what it's going to cost you. If you do the same thing with RF, now you might need multiple repeaters, right? To be fair, you might need a couple extra $400 repeaters, but even if you added another $400 or two, you're going to be about the same cost to go to RF, and now you have dimmers, that are optimized for LEDs. Graphic eyes and WPMs. If you took this class or a similar class 3-4 years ago, graphic eyes and WPMs needed to be replaced. a big part of the backstory here was in international markets, they had this thing called the graphic eye integrale. It was pretty cool. You could even hook up 0 to 10 volt loads to the back of it. Lutron didn't have a good replacement device that they could use in those upgrade situations. So they really needed a link license to support those old integrale units here or over there. Here, I would really just encourage you to replace the graphic eyes. You could only have 8 on a link. Sometimes you only had 2 or 3. And if you look at the cost of the link license, every link on QS essentially costs money because now you're going from a 1 link proc to a 2 link proc. Maybe you're going from 2 processors to 3 processors. If you add that cost up and the cost of the link license, you could buy a couple new QS graphic eyes for that price. And now they have updated hardware with new warranties. Also, these are a bit of a pain. So load types and trim settings were done from the unit themselves. And bringing them over to QS doesn't mean that they have all the features that a QS graphic eye has. You're still stuck in that graphic eye 3500 world. So yes, if you have tons of WPMs on the project, it might make sense to use the link licenses. Otherwise, if you just have a couple, you have a graphic eye in a home theater, just replace it with a graphic eye QS. Wired keypads, 32 keypads per link. And you have to look at how the keypads were divvied up on the old system too. You don't just want to necessarily go around counting up how many keypads. You really need to look at where they were connected, what processors they were connected back to. You could have 15 on this processor, you have 15 on that processor. Guess what? Now they're on 2 HomeWorks QS processors. That means even though you're under 32, that's still 2 link licenses required. There's 2 link translators required. Just be another reason to talk about why they might want to consider going to a QS keypad versus spending the money to get their old keypads working on the new system. Aside from that, you're going to need 24 volt, this different voltage. So these were 15 volt, the new ones are 24 volt. So you will need a power supply for those. And a lot of times these were powered from the power supply that was built into the illumination processor. You don't have that now, meaning you need to buy a PPS1, a PPS2, maybe you just buy the 120 power supply, but you have to account for this. I'm going to show you later a tool that will help you figure out how many LEDs you need to account for. But the 8 series processor on its own supported 350, a 4 series did 150. Basically, every keypad is 15 LEDs. So count up your keypads, times it by 15. That's how many LEDs you need to power up. So maybe you get a PPS1, maybe you get a PPS2, depending on how many keypads you have to power. And RF, while it's probably the most unfortunate, it's also the easiest because, well, you just replace everything. None of it's compatible. You have to replace the tabletops, you have to replace the in walls, you have to replace the plug-in modules, you have to replace the repeaters. And I'd hope that everybody on this call is familiar with our current RF solutions, because if you look at Radio Raw 2, HomeWorks QS, it's all the same. You know what to do. You pop in new repeaters, pop in new in-wall dimmers, plug in new lamp dimmers. HomeWorks QS, this is just a reminder, you're going to use the Ethernet connection for transfers, inter-processor communication, and third-party integration. So just make sure if your illumination system had third-party integration through RS-232, note that they had the inter-processor link. So as you're moving over to QS, these are things you need to account for. All right, so the next step, looking at the different project steps here. We've already determined that a processor replacement is necessary. And what I mean by this is that, look, customer calls you, it's not just a breaker trip. If you have a problem with the HomeWorks illumination processor, it needs to be replaced. There's really no fixing it. Even if you kicked it in and out of boot mode or something and got it working again temporarily, it's not something that you just want to walk away from and say, oh, it's good. I mean, really the only way you're going to fix this problem is by replacing the processors. So then what? Start documenting. Document. Make sure you get all your ducks in a row. Discuss the different options with the customer. Then you want to extract the database. That would be the next step. So what I want to show you now is two different ways that you can extract the database. I'm actually going to have Graham jump on at this point and show you the extraction utility if you've never seen that before. So Graham, I'm going to send you a request to share your screen. Graham's a good multitasker, so hopefully he's not on another call right now.
Okay, give me 2 seconds. There, hopefully everybody can see this. Can you see it, Zach?
Yes, I can see it. Maybe if somebody, one of the attendees wants to put in the questions field, just can you tell us if you can see Graham's screen? All right, we're good, Graham.
Right. Okay, guys, this is a simple utility. We are going to be sending it out to you. It's not on the Lutron website anymore, but this is so valuable in the field just because it's simplisticness. First tab is you want to connect. It will go out and automatically look for the processors, and if it doesn't find them, you press cancel, and then you can go in and manually set things up. You need to find your COM port where you got your RS-232 or your network connected. Baud rate is always a big thing. Not everyone runs on 1152. Even 9600 is used in we know it's slow, but even 9600 is used. Again, the handshaking, and then you just go to connect, and hopefully you do connect. Then the tools come in once you're connected, which is view terminal log. There can be a lot of great information in there, and error log. That tells you an awful lot. Tools that are invaluable. Then we can extract the file, and then we can analyze the system. And I wouldn't use the upload OS. I'd use the main program for that, because once you've extracted, you're going to want to load up the main program anyway, and then start reconnecting with the actual program. Really, that's it. It's that simple, and I think Zach's going to tell you the old traditional way we used to do it. But you will be getting a copy of this, and hopefully this helps your lives.
Thanks, Graham. Yeah, what I'm going to do now is I'll switch back to my screen, and I'm going to open up the software. So this is what the HomeWorks illumination software looks like. It's a little bit dated, and sorry to do this, guys. Can somebody just confirm that you can see my screen again, my HomeWorks illumination screen?
I can.
You can see it? Okay, cool. I'm just gonna move all my other stuff over here so I can see what I'm doing, so I'm not flying blind. All right, this is what it looks like. At first glance, it's a little bit overwhelming, but if you're familiar with HomeWorks QS, a lot of things are going to be the same, but you just have to kind of poke around a little bit. But to get started, if you want to extract using this versus the extraction utility, click on the computer. It says terminal, but this is how you're going to establish the connection with the processor. And in here, there's two little arrows. There's an up arrow and a down arrow. So it's actually calling it a download. So the extraction is like a download. It's automatically trying to connect using this TCP IP wizard. I don't have an illumination processor online, so it's going to fail for me. Just give it a second to error out. This is where you'd also go to run diagnostics. And you can go link by link to see what's currently connected and reporting back to the system. This is what I mentioned. when I said after running that report or before running the report, you'd want to compare what you see in diagnostics to that report. So if you're doing things like replacing keypads or even just making sure everything's up online and running, once you move everything over to QS, you're not going to have that same information. All the keypads are just going to look the same. You're not going to know what's reporting back, what's not reporting back. So it's important to come in here and be able to use tools like diagnostics. So you can come under here, terminal logging, different options for communications. So you can also come in here to do extract project. Here's system diagnostics. Here's the TCP IP setup wizard. So that's where you jump in. You can set your IP addresses to static or dynamic. Just change your different connection settings. System control, shade setup. So this is a combination. Like if you're familiar in HomeWorks QS, you have activate processors where you establish the connection to the processor, and then you have terminal as well. So this is honestly just like a more robust built out terminal function than what we have in HomeWorks QS. So that's where you go to download the file. Once you get the file and open it up, it should look something like this. So I'm in the programming tab right now, but you have the floor plan tab, which is where you go in and you can see all your panels and you go in and you add your devices. My friend Ryan Burnish made this file. Many of you probably know Ryan Burnish from Lutron, but we both like cars. So in his garage, he has a dyno room, I guess, and it's got lots of cool cars. He's got a Ferrari, a GT3, a Supra, an AMG, an M6, so quite the filled out garage. Load schedule, panel assignments. So here's where you go in, an address assignment. Here's where you're doing all the addressing functions, and then the programming screen. So this is where you can come in and start to poke around and look for different programming. This keypad here, let's go to the dining room. This has pretty standard programming. So you have a prepare button. It's just standard, it's not conditional, single action, and here's all the different levels. This is referencing a global scene, so we call them shared scenes in HomeWorks QS. Let's see if I can find one with conditional logic. Not the closet, foyer front entry. So welcome button, conditional logic. This is what you'd want to look out for. These are the type of buttons that aren't going to move over to HomeWorks QS. The prepare button I was just on, that'll move over. All the programming will be done. This one here, if time of day is day, execute the welcome day scene, else execute the night scene. So nothing complicated. I think you guys on this call, I know who's on the call, I think you'd all be comfortable recreating something like this relatively easily in HomeWorks QS. However, sometimes you go in here and it's hard to even figure out what was happening in the conditional. So that's when you might want to have conversations with customers about their system, and if they even understand what's happening with that conditional statement. Maybe you don't even want to go down that rabbit hole. All right, so that's what it looks like when you extract the project. The next thing you want to do is, let's say you went into terminal, you connected, you extracted, you run diagnostics, you see what's reporting. So then we come in here and we actually go through some of the different reports that are available. This is the one I keep talking about. It's the detailed processor link assignments report. I'm going to generate this. And there is a bill of materials report, but this is much better than the bill of materials report when you're trying to figure out exactly what was on the system. It breaks it down by panel. So here's our first panel. It's a PNL8 with a processor at the bottom. So if you're familiar with HomeWorks QS, should be familiar with something like this, except it would have a QS processor and or interface at the bottom. This one in particular has an internal MI. So we would want to replace that when we go to HomeWorks QS. So that would be something that, all right, here we need one MI. And now we start going link by link and we see what's connected. So it looks like we have an RPM for you. And one thing that throws people off at first, it looks almost like 1, 2, 3, 4 for U's. No, that's all 1 RPM for you. And the way and it's just showing it by output, right? It's downlight, shower, vanity. This is where the different outputs are wired to. And if we break down this address, we can see proc 1, link 1, MI1, module 1. These are all on module 1. This is on module 2. This 4A is module 3. Here's the second half of that 4A. And we can go through and see all the different RPM modules that are connected. Then we have this interprocessor link. So we have 1, 2, 3 other processors connected on this interprocessor link. So we have 3. RS-232 link, graphic I WPM link. You can see that we have 2 graphic I's and 1 WPM. Then we have link 5. Here's where we're getting into our configurable links, 4 through 6. And this is great because it's telling us on this processor, here's what link 4 is. If you just walked into the equipment room and you looked at that processor, all these links might look the same. So here's a really nice way to figure out exactly, what should be connected at least. Then go to QED shades. We can count up the QED shades. So here's another, all right, if we were going to replace this, how many drives would we need? If we're going to reuse it, here's a link on a processor. Here's a link license that we need. Here's a link translator that we need. So this is how we establish that bill of materials and what we're going to need for HomeWorks QS. Same thing with the keypad link. We can go through and start counting up keypads, and CCO and CCI devices are going to reside on the keypad link. So just something else to be aware of as you start counting this up. This link here, we can just quickly look at the addresses. We're up to 30, 32. So this would be a fully loaded link in HomeWorks Illumination or HomeWorks QS. You definitely be getting, getting your money's worth if you did a link license for this link in HomeWorks QS, because that link license, while $1,500 sounds like a lot, think about replacing all those keypads. Now you're at $300 times 32, talking thousands and thousands of dollars to replace those. But once again, don't shop for the customer. I would present them with these different options, because while they're going through all this and could potentially be spending tens of thousands of dollars, it might be worth it to them to replace the keypads and go to QS. And while it doesn't happen a lot, I would have the conversation about Palladium at this point. Once again, the infrastructure is in place there. If you're going through this process, if you already know how they live with the system, you could use predefined Palladium keypads, and you can actually drop, if you're just doing the plastic predefined Palladium keypads, you can drop those to $300. And now you're really giving them an elevated aesthetic for basically what they'd be paying for the C-Touch wired keypads. So once again, just present those options. RF link, so this is the last link on the processor. We could go through and say, all right, I'm gonna need a handful of plug-in lamp dimmers, I need a VCRX, I need 3 tabletop keypads, and I need 3 repeaters. And that's what I need to order for the RF. So this is great. You guys can go through this report and you can generate your own tools to create the bill of materials, your own Excel document, however you want to handle this. There is a pretty nice tool available from Lutron, and it's this conversion calculator. So I want to pull up both things here on my screen, get that on one side, get that on the other side. And this is going to be a nice guide to help step you through the process. I'm going to email out this with the extraction utility so that you'll have it. This is still under my resources, but it's actually really hard to find. It's kind of hidden. People don't talk about it a lot, but I think it's a great tool. So right here, you can select how many processors are on the project. It's going to show you these different tabs on the bottom. So we'll just look at this one processor that we have. And it says, all right, oh shoot, keeps jumping back and forth. what's the processor model number? Well, it says right here, it's a P5 MI 120. So H8 P5 MI 120. You go through and you select that. Where is it? There we go. Select the processor model number. Where is it mounted? It's in a PNL8. And then link 1, dimming panel link. RPM, select it. And this is great because you can go through and you can start counting up everything that you need. So let's say that we're able to keep these RPMs and the MIs. We check the date codes. Well, this one has an internal MI. The software is smart enough to know that. So it's going to count up, all right, you need to replace at least one MI because that one was built in. Then you'd start counting up. You'd go through this list. How many 4Us do you have? 5 4Us, 6 4As, et cetera, start counting that stuff up. Maybe we have a couple other panels on that link. Then you go down. So what's on link 4? Graphic IWPM link. So you come in here, you select the type, graphic IWPM, and then we have 2 4-zone graphic eyes. And here's where you can decide, does it make sense to spend the $1,500 and the extra processor link to keep these, or do we want to replace them? So you can do this either way. We could say we're going to do 2 and 1 WPM, go down to link 6, that's our QED shades. So select the type, go to H48Q96, QED shades, how many do we have? Let's say we're going to keep 15 shades. Link 6, that's our keypad link. Remember, we had 32 keypads. So link 6, select the type, keypads. And we'll say we're just going to keep, that's a lot of keypads. We're going to keep 30 keypads and we're going to keep the 2 CCI devices. And look, here's that LED count that I told you about. You don't even have to remember how many LEDs each one accounts for. So we have a total of 470 LEDs, meaning that we could use one of those PPS1 power supplies because those do a total of 500. And then last but not least, we have the RF link. And we had 5 dimmers, we had 3 keypads, we had a VCRX, a couple repeaters. I'm just doing random counts here. And then we come down and it gives us a summary. So let me expand this. Take a look at the summary. It basically counts up how many links that we need, and then it totals it up. So we need 5 links on our QS system. So the bare minimum would be 2 2-link processors and 1 1-link processor. And what's nice is we can go back and play around with this a little bit. So maybe instead of keeping these graphic eyes, get rid of that, let's say that we replace them and put them on the RF link, right? Replace with RF link. Now I scroll back down and now I'm down to 4 links because I was able to consolidate that. This tool is smart enough to know, all right, so he has an RF link there already for the RF devices he has to replace. Now he's just going to have those graphic eyes and WPMs communicate on the RF link. So boom, that saved us a processor and it saved us a link license. So it saved us $1,500 on the link license. It saved us $800 on the processor. So right, that's paying for most of our gear, our QS gear, which is a better solution for the homeowner and honestly easier for you to configure at the end of the day. So that would definitely be the solution that I want to go with. So like I said, you don't have to use this tool. It's great just for doing some high level stuff where you're trying to figure out how many links and how many processes you need to use. Might help you more easily get to that accurate bill of materials that you need. So let me just jump back into this. So we did this, we extracted the database, we opened the database, that stuff's all done. We used that report, we went through the detailed processor link assignment, we checked out that tool, generated the BOM, run the diagnostics tool to see what devices are online. So the next thing that we'd want to do is we'd want to use this converter tool to figure out, all right, exactly how much programming time is this going to take? Is it going to convert everything? Are there a lot of sequences? Are there a lot of conditional statements? You know, what else is involved here? So I'm going to go through this process with you live. I'm going to show you exactly where to find the converter tool, because this is one that I can't send you. This is online. So you go to My Lutron. Another PSA here. A lot of you email us, and we all have different emails at Thea Enterprises. They've all been consolidated, so I'm sure you've seen on our email signatures, everything's changed over to Thea Enterprises now at this point. So you might have done Thea AV or 1 Mile Tech or TheaShownInc.com. We're all over on Thea Enterprises. So you come in here, you go to design software, go to tools, and you go to the HomeWorks illumination to HomeWorks QS converter. Now it tells you high level what it's going to convert, but it's always nice to run through this and you'll get a report afterwards to see exactly what was converted. I'm a little out of season with my coffee mug right now. I don't have any other clean ones at the moment. So grab this, open it. Under options, there's a couple important options. If you had the conversation with the client where you're going to move forward to QS C-Touch keypads, you can convert them to HomeWorks QS. QED shades, maybe you're going to replace the drives. You can choose to leave them or convert them. I'm going to leave them for now and click convert. This is going to take a couple minutes, but after this is done, it's going to tell you it's ready to download. And then it's also going to give you a report. Now, I'm not a fan of watching paint dry or grass grow, so I have this report saved. I'm just going to go ahead and open that up and show you. It's just a text file, but it's going to show you what items were dropped and what items were brought over. So devices like RF guys, things that just aren't going to convert over to HomeWorks QS, they're going to get dropped. So in here, like look, 3 LD lamp dimmers, 2 A&F, that's the fan speed control that goes in the wall. These things were all dropped. So essentially, as you're building out your bill of materials, you might want to come in here and look, oop, all right, I need to go order all this RF stuff on QS to replace all the illumination devices that were dropped. Then these are all the things that were successfully converted. So all the loads, all the keypads, and we'll see that here in a minute when I actually open up the file. All right, so let's see if it's done. It's still, all right, so it's done. The download's ready. Download expires in 4 hours. I can click here to download. I can click here that it's the same conversion report that I just opened for you. Same text file. I already downloaded it to save, you know, literally 30 seconds. So let me just go ahead and open that up. So we use the converter tool, but we still want to open that up in QS. Just want to make sure I didn't miss any steps here. Now, when you guys download this, it's going to download in a version of 10 dot something, I believe. So obviously when you open the file into 15 or whatever version that you're using, it's going to take a minute for it to convert. I saved a few minutes and converted that ahead of time. So that's why it's already in 15.2. So lots of things are going to get brought over. I know I keep saying I'm being a little negative, glass half empty kind of guy, but I'm like, well, the sequences don't come over, the conditionals don't come over, several things that don't come over. There's so much that does come over at this point, and it's going to save you so much time. So you'll see in a minute, but it's going to bring over all my controls, all my devices, all my panels, all my loads, which is huge. So I go into here to design loads, go into the main house, and everything is going to be filled out here. All the critical load information is entered. I go to design equipment. I go to my panels. Where are they? Where does he have that? Equipment room. I think what's huge is that all my loads are attached to the right RPM outputs in the software. Once again, bit of a nightmare trying to go back and figuring this out without the conversion tool. And this is why it's so important to make sure that you, before you commit to any kind of pricing, that you can get the file, use the conversion tool, make sure that this pulls in correctly. Now, one thing you'll notice is this says not assigned. That obviously is because it's not assigned to a processor link yet. I still need to take that data that I got from that Excel file telling me how many processors I need, how many links I need, and I need to add processors in, and I need to link assign. I need to assign links and then link assign these different devices. But lots of good stuff brought over in the design tab. If I go over to the program tab, go to a keypad that I know had programming on it, like this dining room keypad, I go in and prepare, clean up, dining is all there. Deck on, deck off. So this one not only had the engraving on it, but had its programming on there as well. Now, if I go to a button that had the conditional programming on it, like the foyer entry, these buttons here don't have the programming on it. And that's when I need to go back and add that conditional statement. You know, if time of day is day, then run the day scene. If time of day is night, then run the night scene. Or if you talk to the customer and they don't even realize what's going on, or they don't care about it, maybe they're annoyed by it, maybe you don't add that back on in HomeWorks QS. All right, so we did the converter tool. We kind of figured out how much programming we're going to need to do, present the final quote. Then you go ahead and you order the parts and the link licenses. So the link licenses are all part numbered and they're specific to the type of link that you're going to be using. So it's not just like you can order a link and use it for shades or use it for keypads. If you need a keypad license, you order the keypad license with a specific part. In HomeWorks QS, your illumination keypads are not going to show by default. Your QED shades, your old graphic eyes, they're not going to show by default. I'll show you this in a minute, but you need to go under project settings and then project options. And then there's 3 checkboxes to show the different types of legacy devices. RPMs and H48 dimmers obviously show by default because those are native QS device types. Once you have the equipment, once you have the processors in hand, you'll need to call customer service and give them the processor serial numbers. They have a tool on their end where they type in the serial number, what type of link that you're trying to do, and they give you a code. They're going to probably be on the phone with you. They'll read you back the code, and then you need to put that activation key back into HomeWorks QS software. Now, you only need that before you actually go to activate the links. You can do everything else before you have those activation keys from customer service. And I'll show you where to put that in right now. So jump back into HomeWorks QS. So first we go to project settings, and then down at the bottom of project options, you click on this HomeWorks illumination dropdown, and you want to show all these different device types if applicable, right? If you have the GRX graphic eyes, you want to click that checkbox, hit done. Then if you want to enter the software keys, you go to literally just go to tools, software keys. Now, I don't have any activated processors on my system right now, but basically you'd go to processor one, link one, HWI keypads, enter in the code from customer service, boom. And that's the process of entering the software keys. Not rocket science. I'm sure customer service could talk you through this process, but you know, something like exposing the devices under project settings, if that can save you a 10-minute phone call, great. I wouldn't want you to come go through this training and then not know where to do this. And really the goal of this whole training was to take you through the process from start to finish. So, right, I've walked you through it, I've held your hand, we've had some training wheels on, take you through the process, just so if you get put into a situation, if an opportunity presents itself, if you're going to actively go out and talk to some customers about, hey, you have a 10-year-old processor, not trying to scare you, but here's what could happen. Here's what I've seen happen on other jobs. You don't want this to happen at a bad time and have an emergency service call before your big Thanksgiving party, your big holiday party. That's typically when these things, Murphy's Law, right? That's typically when these things seem to fail. So let me jump back into the PowerPoint. That was the project steps, start to finish. And when you're presenting these, right now, this is the, because sometimes customers are asked, well, is there any kind of discount or any kind of program? I already have an existing homework system. Maybe they inherited it, maybe they paid for it already. Is there any kind of discount available? Lutron does have these processor packages, and this is a document that I put in the handouts. It spells out all the different part numbers, what's included, the total list price, the package price, and it breaks out the savings. So this is a nice way to offset the cost of the link license fees, of the link translators. A lot of times people don't like paying for licenses. So there's many different ways that you can approach this. One, you don't even need to bring up the fact that there's licenses. You could say, hey, there's components involved that cost money to get your old stuff working on the new system. And those components are comprised of software and hardware components. The translators, the licenses, right? I mean, it takes this package to get things working on the new system. Here's how much it costs. The other way I've seen it done is you get the savings here using the package. You list out line item by line item, the list price of everything. You list out $1,500, $1,500, $1,500. And then if you need to, you would have some wiggle room to potentially, provide some sort of percentage discount, or say, you know what, I'll work with you. I'll take the price of these licenses off. Or I'll take the price of one of the licenses off because you had some of this savings built in already. So once again, you guys are all, the reason you're on this call today, the reason you're selling HomeWorks is you're successful at selling lighting control. However you want to use these packages to your advantage. But this one here, my buddy Chris Yorgi, when he was trying to come up with these packages, I thought this was funny. He's like, I'm just going to make the part number HQ-full boat-PKG and see what happens. And this one slipped through the cracks. And later on, there's a couple higher ups who are like, what's this full boat product? What's this package? And Chris is like, well, you signed off on it. So that's the one that gives you pretty much everything. Then we have this one here. So the upgrade starter package, where we have a 2-link processor, 2 link licenses, 2 translators, and a connect bridge. This one here, RF, right? So it has a repeater. It only has one processor, one link translator, and we're giving the Connect bridge with these, obviously, because Home Control Plus app isn't supported anymore, whether you have Illumination or QS. So you don't want them to go through this whole process and not have a functional app to go along with their system. And I'm not going to step through all these necessarily, but you can figure out which package is going to make the most sense for your project, and that document is attached. And if for some reason, guys, you're having trouble getting the handouts, don't stress, don't freak out about it. I'm going to send a follow-up email that has all these documents, the 2 tools that we talked about today, the flyer that Graham mentioned, recordings of the webinar. That will all be included in the follow-up email. And then we have the loaner program. I also put this document in there. So once again, not intended to be the long-term solution by any means. It's really to get somebody back up and running who's in a lights out scenario, in a situation where they can't control their lights with their keypads, and it's designed to be a 90-day period. I believe there's a little wiggle room built in there, but basically you have 90 days to move forward with the upgrade. You're going to return the processor. It buys time to evaluate the upgrade. And Lutron does test the return processor, so don't just try to send back the broken one. That's not going to work out for you. I think they have the serial numbers documented as well. And if for some reason the upgrade doesn't go through, the Lutron tactical team is not going to bust into your customer's home and rip the processor off the wall in 90 days. They're just going to end up paying a lot of money for an Illumination processor and your time to put it in without really addressing the heart of the problem. They could absolutely run into a situation 90 days later and be back in the same boat. So that's why this really is just designed to get them back up and running. You want to talk about how to fix this the right way with the Illumination upgrade. All right. So I wanted to end about 15 minutes early to give everybody time to ask questions because we covered a lot of materials here. I did slightly better than that. So I'm going to read through the questions now, and I'm going to go through them out loud because I'm sure that some people asked some questions that will be valuable for everybody to hear. And please feel free to answer questions or ask questions now, and I'll go through them. Okay, yeah, Paul, I forgot to mention this. This is a good idea. So, I did mention potentially upgrading components, or maybe you're in an upgrade situation where you don't have a need for all these different link licenses and link translators and anything else like that. Lutron they used to have a 10% program where it was a 10% off with the upgrade, and it would be useful in situations where you didn't need the link licenses. Maybe you're doing a light touch upgrade. Maybe you're doing some other type of upgrade where these packages don't make sense. While it's not on the books officially, I would not walk away from an opportunity because that there's nothing there. Please reach out to us at Thea. We'll reach out to our contacts at Lutron and see if there's anything that could be worked out in that. It's like a one-off evaluation for every job that comes up like that. So please talk to us about these opportunities. The other thing too, this is an educational webinar to make you feel comfortable with this process, make you feel comfortable with saying yes to these opportunities. We are absolutely here at Thea to support you. And a lot of times we are just gonna point you back to specific sections and specific documents. But please let us know when you have these opportunities, when you have these things in the pipeline. We want them to be on our radar as well and help you work through the process. John, as far as I'm aware, the license keys do not expire. If for some reason you went 6 months later to try to enter it, you would just call back customer service and they'd be able to generate a new key for you. It would not be a big deal. Or you lose it or something like that, they're not going to make you pay another $1,500. Otari, yes, this is recorded. I'm going to send that out to you. I am going to send out the files. The date code thing I addressed with the RPMs. Scott, that was a good point with the Palladium keypads and the seat touch. I did see that out of the corner of my eye. That's why I wanted to mention when you pre-engrave, it really does drop the cost of the Palladium. And now they're not just going C touch to C touch. They're getting something that's a lot more modern, has the dynamic backlight management. And that's something I think everybody should be more comfortable talking about in general. Palladium keypad sales in our territory is still relatively low. And I think some of that is because we're only offering the post-defined engraving pricing, which is significantly more than C-Touch. Please be aware of the predefined engraving process. It really makes it, almost apples to apples in terms of pricing when you're talking plastic C-Touch to plastic Palladium. So whether it's an upgrade or even just in a normal job, be aware that that option exists. All right, please, if I missed anybody's questions, I had a lot of just comments in here, and yes, I can hear you. So I was just skimming through here fast. If I missed anything, please enter it now. Otherwise, you have our email addresses. Reach out to me, reach out to your account manager, whoever it is that you contact at Thea, and we can help provide you with resources and the support that you need to help make this a part of your Lutron business. All right, if you don't have any more questions, that's it for today. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming. This is awesome. We had awesome attendance, and I look forward to seeing all of you in person hopefully soon.